Well, we are patriotic about wine, and as much as we love American wine, we're stepping outside of wine tonight, headed into Portugal for our second class in this Rethinking European Wines series, number 2 of 3. And I believe everyone except for, and I'm going to call you guys out, Leslie and Brian, welcome. You're new to this class series, but you've been in my virtual tastings before, so welcome back. It's good to see you. And so I don't think I need much of an introduction, but since Leslie and Brian, you have not met my friends Mike and Allison, I will do them the justice of telling all the amazing things about them. So Allison is the owner of Please the Palate. It's a boutique agency specializing in marketing and event planning within the wine industry. She's an amazing writer, and she she appears in a variety of publications, including the Wine Industry Advisor, Thrillist, LA Weekly. She's also a columnist for the Napa Valley Register and is a regular contributor to the California Winery Advisory and the Beverage Industry News, which I look at frequently. So it's cool. I'm secretly a fan, although not secretly anymore, but you knew that. And then she also started it's a video series called Crush on This. And how I met her through Mike, who owns Wine Weirdos, and I'll introduce him in a second. But Allison is also a regular, she has regular appearances on the Wine Weirdos video tastings. And then so Mike and I met when I was managing a wine tasting room, what feels like years ago, but I actually was able to quit my full-time job and go full-time with Riviera Wine Group about 3 months ago, or 4 months ago now at this point. So I met him literally like 2 weeks before I quit. And it was such a happy coincidence. And so Mike is the owner of Wine Weirdos, which they do, depending on the platform, 30 to 60-second wine tastings of wines from all over the world. And so in my experience working with them, this is now our 3rd tasting together, they have totally blown open my tasting to the rest of the world, because Riviera Wine Group focuses on California boutique wine. So you guys, do you have anything else to say about your own individual companies?
I plead the 5th.
I think I'm good. Oh, if you like to learn about wine and meet winemakers, I host a podcast called Wine Soundtrack, where I interview winemakers and get to know them in 30 questions. So you learn a little bit about them as winemakers and some about them as wine drinkers and as human beings.
Yeah.
Allison and Gina, I don't know if I told you this probably not on any of these, but the way I even found the stuff, the Gina and the Riviera and all the ones I've done, was sometime a long time ago. I have no idea how I got on Allison's Please the Palate email list, and that's how I found all this. That's awesome. Where.
Isn't that funny? Yeah. The like weird marketing things that sometimes I don't even know. I'm like, how are you my customer?
Well, Kathy,
I like to try to remember to tell people, when I appear out of nowhere and they're like, huh, I thought, oh,
I love that, because I know you're from the list, and David stalks me at events when we used to see each other in live person. And then Kathy and I used to work out together at the Y and started talking wine while lying on a mat stretching one day.
Sounds like a good workout. Yeah, it was a good workout.
Were you using wine bottles as weights like I do?
No, but I think that's what we have to do at home now.
Yeah. I'm not kidding. I've used bean cans and wine bottles in like the 2 at-home workouts that I've done, because I told myself I was going to get into shape during quarantine. That didn't happen. But that's okay. I got some really good wine here. So, priorities. So we're going to go off of the same platform as we did last time. And for our newcomers, basically, Allison and Mike have just vast knowledge bases of wine from everywhere. So Allison, she's going to be in charge of kind of slowly zooming us into the specific wine we're drinking. And if I haven't said it already, please don't wait for us to introduce the actual wine. Please start drinking now. You can go to the red, you can go to the white. We will be officially tasting the white wine first, but you can bounce around to whatever you're pairing it with if you've got food that you're eating, or just kind of however you enjoy wine as you do. But I was saying, so Allison is going to start out here with all of Portugal. And
Wait, first we need the Portugal. Can you see it?
Oh, wait. I see it.
The poster. Wait.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. We're in Portugal now. Okay.
It was a quick flight. No problem. No one's jet lagged. But so then we'll slowly zoom in to the region itself, or the two regions that we'll be tasting from today, and then into the winery is where I'll take over, and then Mike and I will talk about the actual wine and the tasting notes and like exactly what's in our glass. So we're going to go from all the way out there to directly in front of us, and I think that's probably one of the best ways to experience wine from somewhere else in the world where we're not currently, because you really have to give the full picture of the wine itself in order to understand it, and then you can actually enjoy the wine. So that's how I like to learn about wine. And then I also want to introduce my husband, Aaron Lober. He just popped on. Yeah, I'm calling you out. He is here tasting as well. So and again, everyone, this is completely interactive. We really want you to interrupt us and ask questions as they come. We will also have Q&A at the end as well. But we want this to feel like we're all just in the same living room, drinking the same wine, hanging out and having a good time. So unless anyone has anything to say in this exact moment, I will hand it over to Allison.
So who here has been to Portugal? Oh, only a few of us.
I have. We used to have a house there for like 20 years.
Because, you know, Portugal pre-COVID was one of the #1 destinations for tourism. It's been at the top of the list. And if you've been, you know why. And if you haven't been, put it at the top of your list, because they want us to come. They're open and ready. So just plan it. It is one of the most amazing countries with so much to offer. And I've only delved into a very small part of it. I've been to Porto twice, which is in the north, where the Port and Douro region is. I've been to the island of Madeira, which is the most magical place in the world. And I've been down to Lisbon. And on the way, I went to the Down region. So if you think about Portugal, you can fit 3 Portugals in California. So it's a small little country, or we're a very big state. And the wine regions, you may know these, there's Alentejo, Azores, Barreira, Down, Douro Valley, Lisbon, Madeira, and Vinho Verde. And I'm sure you've all heard of Vinho Verde because it's that crisp, refreshing white wine we drink in the summer. You've probably had port, but they also do still wines in the Douro Valley. And then Madeira is that other beautifully fortified wine that's just magical. And today we are going to travel first to the Down region and then to Alentejo. So the Down region, it's DAO with like a tilde over the A. And it took me forever to learn how to say this, because when I went, I was really excited, and I had then traveled. I was in Porto, and I went to a restaurant, and I was walking around with a friend, another American, and they said, "Oh, how long have you been in Portugal?" And I said, "Oh, we were just in the Dow region." And they're like, "Where?" And I said, "Dow." And they kept saying, "The port house?" And I said, "No, Dow, you know, the region right below you guys." And they're like, "No." So my friend says it, which it sounds to me like she said the same thing. And they go, "Oh, Down." And I was like, "That's what I've been saying all along." So if you think of the word down, D-O-W-N, but with an M at the end of it, and then you kind of eat the M at the end, down, that's how you say it. So let me hear everyone say it. Take off your mics 1 second and say down.
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 Okay, see, now when you go, nobody will laugh at you. So the Down region is located in the center of Portugal. If you think about it, it really is the heart of Portugal. If you look at a map, it's located right where the heart is. And while it may seem like a new region to you, it is actually the second oldest wine region in Portugal. It is about an hour and a half southeast from the city of Porto, so really easy to get to if you're flying into Porto. And it was deemed as a region in 1908. The interesting thing about the Down region is that wine has continually been produced in this region since 1908. And what's interesting about that is, if you recall, Portugal was under dictatorship for a number of years. But when the dictator was in Portugal, he designated that the Down region was to be the region focused on wine. And so they continued to produce wine. A lot of cooperatives were formed at that time. That was a way for all the producers would grow their grapes and then sell their wine. And let's see, Portugal became a democracy in 1974. And the co-ops continued, but the wines weren't always the most balanced of wines. So from the 1980s to the 90s, people started to overlook the Down region. Alentejo became very popular. Port from Douro became popular, even some of the still wines, and people just weren't thinking about it. But in the last 2 decades, the quality of the Down region has drastically improved. And another unique thing is that they used to do all field blends. And what's happened over the last sort of decade is winemakers have really delved into individual grapes and understanding what a grape brings to a blend, and started making single variety wines, which is what you'll be enjoying today. So there are 150 wineries in the Down region. And I remember driving from Porto and just seeing the landscape change. It was like really large trees, a lot of forest. The vineyards are surrounded by forests. And what's great is that the region was never commercially exposed. So the forests still surround the area. And the Down is also surrounded by 5 major mountain ranges. There is, and this I have to cheat and look. There's Serra do Caramulo to the west, Serra do Butchico to the south, and I'm bastardizing my Portuguese pronunciation. The Serra de Nave to the north, and Serra de Estrela and Serra de Acor to the east. And it's hard to find, but there is a cheese called Serra de Estrela that is from Portugal, from the region. And you found some, David?
Have it.
Oh, you have it.
I have. Actually, I brought it back.
It's such a good cheese. And so it is from this region, and will pair perfectly with this white wine that we have. So by being surrounded by the mountains, this is a region that is sheltered from all outside influences. And it hasn't had phylloxera. It has been really kind of untouched. And the trees, the mountains, and on the forest around also act as a barrier to the coastal rains, as well as the continental winds. So when you think about the climate in the area, it's a temperate area. It's a continental climate with some Mediterranean influences. The winters are really cold and rainy, and the summers are very hot and dry. But what is one of the greatest values in a wine region is that they have a diurnal shift, where it goes really hot during the day and really cold at night. And when you're able to have the temperatures drop so much at night, the grapes are able to rest. They don't have to use their acidity up. And it really results in very vibrant, fresh, elegant wines. And the soils are granitic with some schist, just throwing that out there if that means something to you. It does influence the grapes, but I won't go too much into that. There are rivers. The Down is a river. It's a regional river network. The Down is the namesake, and then the Mondego and the Alva. So 3 rivers are running through it. So that water source also influences the climate. The vineyards are all sitting at a plateau more than 1,300 feet above sea level. So they get sun exposure, and that helps ripen the grapes and bring them to their full sugar levels. So when you think about Portugal, Portugal is mostly known for its red wines. And the Down region is no exception. They make red wine, white wine, sparkling wine, rosé. They do everything in the Down. And you'll find that across the board, if you taste a wine from Down, you'll find value and you'll find quality, and it'll blow you away. So the primary red grapes are Touriga Nacional, which is grown all over Portugal, but I'll give you one little insider tip. Touriga Nacional is indigenous to the Down region. You can sound very knowledgeable saying that because I'm sure Alentejo and Douro and everyone would like to tell you that it's one of their indigenous grapes, but it is actually indigenous to this region. There's Tinto Roriz, which we also know as Tempranillo. There's Alfrochero and Jaén and Tinto Cal. And if you ever get the chance to try an Alfrochero or a Jaén, they're just amazing red wines. I think of Alfrochero a little bit like Nebbiolo, and it's just gorgeous. The primary white grapes are Encruzado, Mavazia Fina, Cercial, Goveo, and Bical. And historically, these were all blended together. And when you blended them together, Encruzado would provide sort of the structure and the aging capability of the wine. The Malvasia Fina was the flavor. The Cercial was the acidity. Again, that's a grape you find in port. Goveo was the minerality, and Bical gave it the body and the strength. And as I said, winemakers started to pick apart these grapes to see what they could do. And I'm so glad they did, because you've been sipping it, but you're now going to taste probably one of my favorite white wines of all time, Encruzado. You've been sipping it, and if you had not known that we were drinking Portuguese wine and not known this was an Encruzado, what might you have thought this was?
Sauvignon Blanc.
Okay.
Or Vino Verde, or anything with really high acid.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Well, it's actually, what's really special about Encruzado is that Jancis Robinson, who's a very famous wine writer, once likened it to a Premier Cru Chablis. And Chablis is Chardonnay. You could also think of this like a white Burgundy. And when I say that, I remember meeting a winemaker, Paulo Nunes, who makes a beautiful Encruzado, not one of the ones we're drinking today. And he said that he called Encruzado, he called it plastic, that it was a grape that is malleable and that it has the capacity to change. And when I think about a malleable neutral grape, I think of Chardonnay. Chardonnay is a phenomenal grape that really reflects where it's from and how it's treated by the winemaker. And Encruzado is that also beautiful grape that really represents the place. So it's grown almost exclusively in the Down region. You have granitic soils, as I mentioned, you have high altitudes, diurnal shifts, and all of this helps because this is a really slow ripening grape. The result is that you get a rich, full-bodied wine that can have aromas of lemon and green papaya. It can be passion fruit, stone fruit, melon. It can also pick up herbal and floral characteristics as well as mineral notes. It can be drunk really young, but it also has the capacity to age. And that's what's really exciting about it, because like some great white wines, there's nothing great than watching a wine evolve and as it picks up newer characteristics. So according to this winemaker I referred to before, Paulo, he once told me that Encruzado is good to drink really young and enjoy it for the first 4 or 5 years. But if you hold on to it longer than that, it has a neutral gap for 2 to 3 years where it gets a little dumb and you don't want to open it. So just hold on to it, wait another couple more years, and after that neutral gap, he thinks that the wines are even better as Encruzado ages because it starts to develop notes of hazelnut. And so I don't know that this wine will not make it, but maybe you can order more of it and hold on to it, because 2017, we're 3 years in, you got another 2 or 3 years and then dumb years and then go from there. So that's pretty much, the Down region and Encruzado. And
I have a question, Allison. Yeah, have you had, so we're drinking our 2017 tonight, have you had an aged Encruzado before?
I had a couple when I was there and got to taste them very briefly. I've had an 18 and I've had a 16. but I have not had much younger. But when I left Florida Nellish, where Paulo Nunes is the winemaker, I took a bottle of wine, and I think it was the 2013, if I'm not mistaken. And I said to him, would you sign my bottle? I want to take this home and put it into my cellar. And when he signed it with the year I should drink it in. So he signed like 10 years from now. So every time I open up my wine refrigerator, which is right here, and I see the bottle, I'm always reminded I cannot touch this wine for another like 7 years.
That's so smart. Everyone should do that. Genius.
So, but it's so good the way it is. Like, I'm not patient enough to wait because I'm just obsessed with this wine. So
Chardonnay has similar dumb phase. Chardonnays people think of as drink, it's a white wine, drink it up. But Chardonnay can be amazing with 10 years age on or longer, 20 years age. I mean, I've had Kistler from like the late 80s and stuff, and it was phenomenal. Some of the best white wine I've ever had. So I think that, Chardonnay has similar characteristics. So that again resonates with what you were saying. I think Gina's point of Sauvignon Blanc is not to be missed either. I think it does have this particular bottle has some characteristics, especially on the nose.
Yeah.
Kind of that grapefruit thing comes to mind, and sort of grape feel. It also kind of reminded me of the Vermentino. I know some of the folks here were at that tasting too that we did a month or two ago. And it reminded me of that Role that we had from Two Shepherds. But yeah, definitely the Chablis characteristic. I think the most striking comparison to Chablis would be the minerality, which I think we talked about last week, kind of that hard to sort of je ne sais quoi thing, that white wine lovers like to talk about, but it's almost something that's kind of mysterious and hard to pinpoint, and some wine writers have called it kind of ridiculous. They've said minerality is not a really definable, usable term. But I don't know,
when you think of like
minerality.
When you think of like wet stone or cool rock or chalkiness, those are all terms used that imply minerality. And I think that, to your point, Gina, of Sauvignon Blanc, I think when you get the citrus notes, and I would say Sauvignon Blanc more like a Sancerre, where you have a little more mouthfeel.
Totally.
I totally see how that would be like a similar thing. And then picking up some of the complexity, I think that's where it goes more into Chablis-like. But again, Encruzado is its own grape, and it's a special grape. And I know that what's special about this wine is it's a female winemaker. So Gina, take it away.
Yeah. So what I find really interesting, just as like a brief overview of the two wines that we're drinking tonight, is they're both sustainably made and sourced. Kelman's and Cruzado that we have in our glass right now is from a very small vineyard, and then the red is from a really large vineyard. And it's interesting to talk about the differences in their farming techniques, because a lot of the times the small family-owned wineries and vineyards like what we have in our glass right now, it's really easy to do everything by hand. And that's something that a lot of people talk about with pride. And, it's not good unless it's all done by hand. But if you have a really large vineyard, and Allison and Mike and I were chatting about this before everyone else came in, it isn't necessarily beneficial to do everything by hand, because it slows down your harvest. You could potentially not pick your wine at the exact time that you want to. But we can get into more of that when I start talking about the red. But this teeny tiny little vineyard, owned by Juliana and Raphael Kelman. They purchased the vineyard it was planted in 2000, and almost more than half of it is planted to Touriga, and I'm so sorry, I'm going to butcher all these words, but Touriga Nacional, which is that grape variety that Allison was talking, or one of the grape varieties that Allison was talking about. And the rest is also planted to the traditional grape varieties of Portugal as well. And their winemaker's name is Antonio Narcisco, something like that.
Narcisco.
Thank you. But
they do a lot more shushing and chushing in Portuguese.
I need to like really bring in the Jewish part of me. I need to access those other weird things that I don't normally say in English. But I think one of the cool things about the region, and more specifically the grape variety and Cruzado, is that Portugal itself is known for their blends. They blend everything. And Allison was talking about this earlier, how they really started picking the different varieties apart and seeing, you know, how do each of these differentiate, and what can we pull out from single variety wines. And Cruzado is one of the most celebrated single variety wines in Portugal, at least in terms of the white varieties. So that's why, or one of the reasons why we chose to taste this wine tonight, is because it's often hard to find a single variety wine coming out of Portugal. So this is really, really special. So the Kelman family vineyard is located in Nelas. Am I pronouncing that right? Which is
Nellish.
Nellish. Okay. Apologies.
I only know this because I've heard it said enough times. It's not because I actually speak Portuguese.
Okay. Rhymes with delish. Nellish. Which makes sense. Which is in the heart of the Dow region. And if you guys have that tech sheet pulled up that I sent to you in your email on Wednesday, you can actually see the orange circle right in the heart of the Dow region, which is where this vineyard is from. And so like I said, they planted in 2000, and the vineyard itself is 6 hectares, which I didn't do the math, but Google did it for me, is 14.83 acres. And like I said, more than half of that is planted to not in Cruzado, but to Touriga Nacional. The vineyard itself is on a really gentle slope, which has lots of sandy soil, which is made specifically of decomposed granite. And the benefit of that is that you get really, really, really good drainage. So you avoid things like root rot, any kind of weird, like soggy mold issues close to the ground. And then also, like Allison was saying, they experience a really beautiful diurnal shift. And that adds to the acidity of this wine specifically, because of the cooler temperatures that you get in the evening. And then the warmer afternoons really allow for a nice mellow, slow ripening season right before harvest. And yeah, that's all I've got. Mike, what are you tasting?
I mean, just to speak again about the diurnal shifts, one of the things that accompanies it, or that it creates, is kind of this freshness, and there's tons of citrus peel and sort of lively, almost sort of green apple, like tart green apple, like you would get on a Chardonnay perhaps, and maybe floral characteristic, although I can't really put my finger on it. I just think it's a really cool wine. Very like it's become more aromatic as it opens up. I mean, mine's been sitting there for about a half hour, and it's becoming.
I also get a little tropical fruit and a little kind of white peaches on the finish.
Kind of a pink grapefruit on the nose. The palate's becoming more mineral driven though, as it warms to room temp, to ambient temp. It's just sort of becoming like nobody would confuse this for a New World wine. It's starting to really taste European and almost French in style to me, which is interesting. It kind of has that cool climate thing that you might get with something with kind of a coastal influence, but I know this is more elevation based rather than it's kind of in the center of Portugal, right, Allison?
Yeah, yeah, and if the winemaking, it's 10 months in new French oak, so it's fermented in stainless steel, and then it's 10 months in new French barrels and 1 month in stainless steel after that. There's a lot of batonnage where they're mixing it around, and it really results in this full-bodied wine that, but also has so much acidity that balances that. So it's not. It fills the palate, but then that acidity and, like you said, Mike, that minerality just kind of, passes through.
Right, it's fairly complex wine. I mean, it's not a simple, straightforward, easy drinker. It has a little bit of depth to it, which I really like. We tasted this wine about a year ago, or maybe longer than a year and a half ago on the show, and we're struck by how fresh and lively it was. And I think this time in the bottle, it's become, was that the 16 or the 17? I don't remember, but
It was a 17 actually.
this is amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's developed, I think, at this point, and become a little more complex and a little less sort of vibrant and a little more just weird. I'm curious what everyone else thinks of this wine.
Yeah,
Are
what
you
do you
guys
guys
liking
think?
this wine, or is it difficult? Is it boring?
Loved it. I guessed Chardonnay, but I was too embarrassed to say it to the whole group just in case. I said that. And the other thing was, I'm surprised it was in new oak. I don't taste any oak on it. I had told my husband, like, oh, stainless steel all the way. If you said neutral oak, I would have gone with that, but I'm surprised.
I think what's interesting is that, you know, when a wine is well made, you shouldn't know the difference about new oak or used oak, or even for that matter, what type of oak. It should all be integrated and well balanced into a wine. And I think this exemplifies that. New oak doesn't mean it has to be over the top, hit you over the head, like some wines do, unfortunately. This is a wine that's really well integrated. And I think the botonnage, where they're punching down and they're mixing the lees with the fruit, really adds to that sort of texture and that integration that makes it so beautiful. And it's crazy because this wine is under $20. So I'm telling you, across the board, if you see an Encruzado and you don't want to spend the price of Premier Cru Chablis, you buy Encruzado and you will be happy. And you go into every steakhouse. I've done this actually. I was in Texas at a steakhouse where they had a couple I was in town I worked with the Down region to do their events in the US. And in February, we were in in October last year, we were in Houston. And then in February, we were in Dallas. And I went into a steakhouse in Houston where they had, a nice little Portuguese list of red wines. And we looked at the master somm and we were like, my friend who had traveled with me to the Down region, another writer, we're like, where is your Encruzado? Shame on you for not having one on the list. Like, you have all these expensive Chardonnays, but you could put on an Encruzado and sell a lot of it. And so he laughed at us, but I'm telling you, you will wow every friend with an Encruzado.
I feel like this is one of those things where, like, you've never seen or heard of Encruzado before, and now everywhere you go, it's going to start to pop up, and we're all going to be like hoarding Encruzado.
From your lips, I'd say, because there isn't enough, Encruzado is, a lot of people say it'll be the next white wine, and it would be great. The Down region really does make more red wine. I keep telling them they need to hang their hat on this. I mean, yes, they make beautiful red wines. The Trigo Nacionals are great. The Alfrecheros and Jaennes are amazing. But Alfrechero and Jaennes are small productions and lesser known. Trigo Nacional, everyone makes in Portugal. I said, hang your hat on this and you will be known, because, I mean, I think this can appeal to a lot of white wine drinkers. It's got the crisp acidity and minerality for those that like fresher and crisper. It's got texture and body for wines, people who want a little more complexity in a wine. It pairs with food. It has ageability. It's kind of like it hits on all cylinders.
I'm wondering if anybody would want to compare it to the Alto Adige that we had a couple weeks ago. I think it has some of the similar mineral characteristic on the palate. Other than that, I think it's very different. I think the nose is very different. This smells like it's going to be a lot more fruit forward and sort of fresh, and maybe like almost like that tropical fruit always reminds me of like Sonoma Sauvignon Blanc or something, that always is like a characteristic that tropical fruit brings to me. But I'm wondering if anybody wants to compare the two, or say if they prefer one or the other, or notice similarities.
I think that this is a really good pairing wine because it does have that slightly fuller body. I think I took my last sip like maybe 90 seconds ago and I'm still tasting the wine. I mean, so I think that in and along with a beautifully paired meal would just like really heighten the experience. The white that we had for the Italian tasting was gorgeous, but such an easy drinker just by itself. Of course, you could pair it with other things, but I think that this is just slightly more interesting. And I'm not saying that the other one isn't interesting.
Sure.
This has a really nice ability to do a lot of things with a lot of other different flavors. So I'm appreciating.
Mike, you never ask people what they like better. That's like asking who their favorite child is. You're allowed to like them both
You love them all the same.
There's a time and a place for everything. If I was having a fish stew right now, or fish soup, or any kind of fish, this is the wine I'd want with it. And whatever David and Deborah are about to have looks really good.
I just saw those plates drop. I'm like, dinner.
It's shrimp and bacon and saffron rice.
Ooh, so I think that has a potential to go with the white wine as well as maybe the red wine.
Wow, I guess I was thinking.
So are you guys ready to move on to red wine? You can revisit this one because it has, so much, it'll live on and on. But we're gonna now travel south of Lisbon to Alentejo. The Alentejo region, unlike the Down region, which is this tiny little place that's the heart of Portugal, Alentejo it covers about 1/3 of Portugal. So it's a very, very, very large region. And most of Alentejo consists of undulating plains and gentle hills. It's got, it only has serious mountains to the northeast near one town near the border of Spain. So if you think of the Down region that is surrounded by 5 large mountain ranges, now you have a place that's more about plains and valleys with soft hills and one mountain range out towards Spain. Of course, you've got the coast in the other direction, and they don't have anything necessarily blocking them from that coast. So by Spain, as it rises up, the air gets a little cooler and it's a little greener. And then you have a variety of soils that vary. So you have schist, you have pink marble, you have granite, you have limestone, you have a lot of, clay. There's also clay, which gives for some really nice finesse and elegance in a wine with a little muscle. So DOP Alentejo, which on the bottle, this also says Alentejano, which I went back and forth recently. Mike and I did this when we were doing a video on another wine, and Alentejano is Alentejo. It's just another name for it. It's not another region. We were very, very confused. But there are 8 subregions that cover about 1/5 of the Vino Regional Alentejano region. So the whole region as a whole is Alentejano. The DO is Alentejo, just to kind of clarify that. But the reality is that we don't really see these sub-regions on the bottles that often, and they don't mean a lot to us as an American consumer. So really, you're looking for Alentejo and go from there. So grapes, they do a number of grapes. The typical ones: Borba, Evora, Redondo. Grapes you've never heard of. These indigenous varieties. That make really beautiful, easy drinking reds. And I think if you've had reds from Alentejo, you would agree they're very easy drinking, value-driven red wines. But the one that we have today is, oh yeah, that's right. It's Aragonese, and Aragonese is another name for Tempranillo or Tinto Roriz. So you have Tempranillo, you have 40% Trincadera, 10% Alicante Bouschet, and 10% Trigo Nacional. So it is a typical Portuguese red blend, but I think it's a really beautiful wine. And Gina, why don't you tell us about the producer?
Yeah. Silly side note, I got really excited when we were talking about the wines to put into this tasting because my last name is Boucher, and Alicante Boucher just connected me in a silly way. Anyways, so like I was saying before, this vineyard and winery is massive compared to the 6-hectare vineyard that we were talking about with the Encruzado. well, the vineyard itself sits on, let me find my numbers. So the vineyard is 230 hectares or 568 acres, but that's sitting on over 4,000 hectares of land, which is almost 10,000 acres for the entire estate, owned by the Castello Branco family, who has owned this land for 3 centuries. Nope, sorry, my numbers are all lost. But anyways, so this is a massive estate. One of the things that is really beautiful about this land is its biodiversity. It didn't start out as a vineyard, but they have since planted the vineyard, which was planted in 1995. And their more modern winery, the one that is in existence today, was built in 2002. Other than grapes, they also produce and grow olive trees, which is massive. If you go to their website, they're like all about their olive trees and the olive oil that they produce. So olive trees, vines of different kind, wheat, barley, corn, onions, garlic, poppies, and then they also grow, they have pastures for cattle and black mountain pig. So the reason why I brought this up is because biodiversity in a vineyard and just any agricultural land to begin with is so unbelievably important for the health of the land itself. And if you don't have healthy land, you're not going to have healthy grapevines or lettuce or cabbage or wheat or barley or anything else that's coming out of that land. So one of the really beautiful things, and if anyone knows anything about biodynamically grown wine, this is a huge part of their farming techniques, is bringing in different crops to put into the vineyard at different points of the year when the grapevines aren't growing. So you put in different things like peas, and that has natural nitrogen that fixes the soil, that fixes the nitrogen in the soil. And you put in certain like different grain like wheat and barley, and you plant that in the where you would normally be walking. And all that does is just really help re-enrich the soil. And if you don't do that, then and this is a very dramatic explanation, but if you don't do that and you have years and years and years of soil that only has one specific crop, then the soil essentially gets completely depleted of its nutrients that you need for an entirely happy soil ecosystem. And then you wind up in the most dramatic situations with like the Dust Bowl. Your soil becomes completely dusty, and there's nothing in the soil to make the crop that you're growing the best it can be. So that's one of the beautiful things about this sustainably farmed vineyard. They're also following the integrated production system, which is a wider scope of sustainability, but biodiversity is a really important part of that. And those standards are set by the EU's environmental production laws. The estate has some pretty cool history. It actually dates back to the 14th century and has been mentioned as early as 1378 in the early days of Portugal's kingdom. The family that owns it today is not the family that owned it back then. However, this land itself is extremely historical and has a lot of significance because it's in one of the largest agriculturally productive zones in Portugal. And let's see, so the vineyard itself is south-facing, and it's set on a sand-rich schist loam, which is talking back to that specific soil. And there's not a lot of hills and valleys, but it's just gentle slopes, which produce a really kind of even growing field for those grapes. And then the red grape varieties that are planted on this vineyard, and I'm going to say all of these incorrectly, but it's Aragonese, Trigonasadira, Castelao, Touriga Nacional, Syrah, Merlot, Cab Sauv, and Alicante Bouschet. So some of those which are obviously in this blend. And then
yeah, and on that note, I had mentioned there are a lot of indigenous varieties that are grown in the Alentejo that aside from the ones you mentioned that are becoming a little more familiar to see, and some that you wouldn't know, there has been a new generation of international varieties introduced to the area. So you'll start to see Syrah and Cabernet Sauvignon more in this region than perhaps in the past.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a good point about something that Mike said about the Encruzado before, was that he really is experiencing these kind of French expressions from the Encruzado, and it just makes sense that they're kind of pulling an inspiration from France's winemaking techniques as well. And you do see that in the planting of Cab Sauv and Merlot and varieties like that. But just going back to the family, so it's a totally multi-generational estate. And I was correct, actually. The Castello Barranco family has owned this land for 3 centuries and has been farming this land since then. Currently, the owners are Jose Antonio Ferraro Castello Barranco, that's one person, and then 2 of his family members, and then the grandchildren are operating it as well. The winemaker is Rui Reguinha, and he is now producing wines for 6 of the wine labels that are produced from this vineyard. This one obviously is one of them. It's the Herades das Albarroñas. And so there's 5 other wine labels that they produce, all from their estate vineyard. And yeah, Mike, what are you tasting?
Sorry. Sort of dried fig, kind of like wet tobacco leaf, if that makes any sense. Again, similar to last week, as it's opening up, it's starting to give me a little of that pencil lead sort of thing, but I don't think this wine is old. I'm also getting kind of some, it's 2017, I'm getting some kind of black cherry, and I'm getting actually the heat from the 14% alcohol. It's kind of, if I stick my nose too deep into there, it kind of like singes the hairs. It's a little hot, which not normally a great thing, but it'll happen on some wines. And this one, I think if you kind of get your nose maybe an inch or 2 back, you get a little more of the fruit aromas, but kind of the cherry and the heat together from the alcohol produces kind of a kirsch thing, which is interesting. On the palate,
I'm getting a little licorice too, which is welcoming. I think that's, I don't like black licorice by itself at all, but when I taste a little bit of it in wine, it's great.
Kind of that more brutal sort of Northern European black licorice, right?
Yeah.
Like it kind of has that almost ammonia-y aspect. It's not quite to that point, but it's definitely on the harder, more darker side of licorice. But the palate is different, I think, than the nose. The palate is very fruit forward and kind of round, has great tannin. I think, one thing that I thought was interesting when I was reading about the Trincadera grape, which I think is 40% of it, that they use that primarily for port. So you won't find like single varietal Trincaderas from what I understand, but they use that in port, and it's mainly to give it kind of that dark, intense color and sort of that dark flavor. And I'm getting that. I see that. That kind of makes sense.
And that's also what Alicante Boucher does. Gives a lot of that kind of dark color and fruit push that.
Well, the 2 of them together are really producing, I think, I think we were seeing this wine came in at what, like $9, Allison, on the
it's under $10, I believe.
It's more
expensive. What was it?
Oh, it's more than that?
Just slightly, but yeah, it's very affordable.
Like $13, $14?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, for what this is, I actually was trying it last night, and just on Pop and Pour then, from the core of it, it was giving some sort of mint characteristics, some sort of really pretty sort of leafy herbal type things. I'm wondering what everyone else is thinking. Are they having similar notes or contrary to these?
I would agree with you on a lot of the notes that you pull out. I don't necessarily agree with the heat. I don't find this to be a hot wine. I think it's a balanced wine. I think it's got a lot of fruit, and then on the palate, there's so much acidity. I don't think that it's a high alcohol wine or an out of balance wine at all.
I think it's out of balance. On the palate, it's definitely not out of balance. The heat is transparent. I don't get anything on the palate. But on the nose, it kind of has that kind of kirschy sort of aspect to it.
Yeah, I just find it a very, like, there's this kind of subtle elegance to the simplicity of the wine that's got a lot of, it's very smooth and drinkable. You know, probably you want it with a little food because it's got that acidity that you want. You know, acid and tannins are what you want in wine to pair with food. So that's what this does. Because if it was a big fruit bomb, then it would just be a cocktail. But I totally get what you're saying with the kind of graphite, the pencil lead, and the what was the other thing that I get a little bit of that kind of herbaceousness, and I really like that.
One thing to note also about the winemaking and aging of this specific wine is that it spent 3 months in French and American oak. And I think that's really worth talking about, the differences between French and American oak barrels and what flavors they impart on or don't impart on the wines that they're aged in. And you guys can totally expand on this, but French oak is definitely the most popular. What I know to be true about the different types of oak is the level of how porous the pores in the oak actually are. So you can get really, really, really tiny holes in the oak barrels, which allow the wine as it's aging to slowly go through the oxidation process, and that allows it to age. And then depending on what other types of oak, you also have Hungarian oak, and then I think there's one more, pop in if anyone knows it. But so the Hungarian, American, and French oak have different levels of how large those pores are, which allow for different levels of oxidation. So if you have like a huge vat of wine, you might want something that has a slightly larger pore to allow the aging of that wine. But they also impart different flavors. Like with American oak, I get this really heavy pine, like think of like Christmas time, like a Christmas pine candle. I really get that. In this, because it's balanced out with the French oak, I get a tiny bit of that on the palate, but it's not overwhelming at all, and I actually find it extremely welcoming.
Yeah, typically they say that American oak gives you dill and pickle, like dill, and French gives you vanilla.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know,
Yeah.
but to your point, I think I'm not getting a lot of that pine or dill.
Well, I think part of what's kind of brilliant about this wine is that it only spends 3 months, you know, so it's not going to have a intense influence. And with 2-3 years in, it's going to kind of not be a super intense oaky experience like we think of, because we're used to, you know, like Northern California wines, Napa or something, where it's just so oak oriented. And Allison and I were tasting a couple Paso Zins earlier, and we had one that was very heavily 100% new American oak, and it was hard to tolerate for me. It was very intensely that dill sort of thing in a way that was not palatable. It overtook almost everything. So I love that they just you know, probably more, you know, fitting for the price range. It does not spend a lot of time in oak, but I think that's one of the benefits. Some Riojas, for instance, if you drink them young, they just taste like an American oak bomb, the same way that some Napa cabs might taste like a French oak bomb. So unless you really, really love and crave that oaky sort of nose and flavor, I think that wine nerds kind of move past that and get put off by that at some point, although it does have its place.
But one thing I would say is that no matter how we wax on about oak or stainless steel, I mean, they all have an impact on the wine, but as a wine drinker, don't let anything that we say be an ultimatum for how you look at another wine, because there are no ultimatums. There's no, it's always this or always that. And if you see something that says 100% French new oak, don't run away from it assuming that it's going to be over the top. You really have to taste a wine or know the winemaker or do a little research to know how that works with the grape and how integrated it is and everything like that. Because you know, again, and the same thing with all the notes. I mean, if you think that it's crazy that Mike's like lead pencil, you know, throwing out these aromas, a lot of it is just using your own vocabulary of what's familiar to you. Lead pencil may not be a familiar aroma to you as much as, you know, granite or I don't know, a smell, like depending on what you did in your childhood. If you mowed a lot of lawns, green grass is a really prominent aroma for you. Whereas if you spent your time in an urban city, you might not know what the smell of grass is, you know.
Right.
Where does dill come from? Where does the dill? I mean, that's such a unique herb. I would not associate it with oak, like in any sense. So like,
yeah, you know, I think that I don't know if you guys can speak to this better, but my understanding of any time when we say vanilla or dill, or we talk about the aromas that we smell in the wine, we're talking about compounds and compounds and acids that when they're combined will imply these aromas. Like they're called terpenes, and they're like 5 different categories that they fall under. And this is where I always fail on my wine studies, is I can't remember what they are.
The point is, there's chemical reactions and we smell them, and then we relate them back to other times we smelt that, we had experienced that chemical reaction aromatically. So that's essentially what we're smelling. I'm not actually smelling pencil lead, but it reminds me of what it smelled like when I was a kid and had a pencil in 3rd grade and for some reason was smelling the pencil. So that's where it relates to that.
Yeah.
Right?
So if you figure that oak barrels, when they're made, are toasted, you know, the wood staves are burned and heated in order to bend them and combine them. And as they're toasted, and every barrel will have a different level of toast. And depending on what the winemaker wants, you can have a light, medium, or heavy toast. And then you have a new barrel, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. That intensity, and I think that it's the toasting of the barrel that will bring out these sort of chemical compounds. And American oak, based on where it's grown, must impart more notes of sort of this kind of dill and pine than French oak. That's something I think I have to research to understand more of.
Do you know what the like rusting period is? Are there standards and
for the oak barrel or for the wine?
For the barrels.
Each cooperage will have their own thing. So what happens is, I was just talking to a winemaker. I was in Paso a couple of weeks ago interviewing people for my podcast, and talking to one winemaker who was telling me about how, like, one wine he uses one barrel cooper and one wine he uses another one. And I'm like, how did you even approach that? Because they meet with the producers, and to what Gina was saying, they're looking for, you know, sort of like how tight the wood is and how porous it is. And one producer might have one style and another nuance a little that he thinks will work better with a different grape variety. And I'm just looking at that, like, that is so way beyond my capacity of understanding. Like,
well, and the funny thing about,
and here's what oak does, and here's what stainless steel does, and here's what clay does, and I'm good with that.
the other crazy thing about cooperages themselves, which are the barrel makers, there is no standardization between what a light toast to a heavy toast is. So each individual cooperage will have their own like level of toastiness that you get from a barrel. And so you really have to explore, as a winemaker, which I'm not, but you really have to explore different cooperages and what you want from each wine. And the cool thing that I learned about how different coopers can express to you how the different levels of toast that they'll put on the barrels is that they'll bottle wines in the light toasted barrel, the same wine in a lightly toasted barrel, a medium toasted barrel, and then a heavy toasted barrel, and then they'll send those to the winemaker so you can really experience, okay, this is the same Pinot, for instance, with each of those individually toasted barrels. And then you can say, okay, that's the effect. Of course, the purchasing winemaker will have a different wine that they'll end up putting in that barrel. So it's all different anyways, but it gives you a good idea. And then the next Cooper that they go to will have a completely different level. So it's they're all kind of within a range, but they're all different, which is cool, but challenging to navigate as a new winemaker, I would assume.
And then
The fun science.
Yeah.
Well, that's the science I like.
Yeah.
Making wine is very scientific. And, you know, I think ultimately when you look at a wine like this that's coming in under $15, do you like it? That's the question. And if you like it, you know, it's a drink. I think it's a great drinkable wine and a good value. And it's a really fun wine that, you know, I wouldn't overthink beyond anything. But I think that what the winemaker has done here in using a combination of minimal time in oak, it's only 3 months in a combination of French and American, adds a little more texture to the wine. And I look at how it adds more, I'm more interested in the texture of a wine than I am in necessarily what I smell. I mean, that's important, but you know, as I said, each of us will have certain things that stand out more to us. Like Mike and I have a different perception of alcohol and heat. You know, what he was sensitive to and noticed wasn't something that was in my frame of description. And so is he wrong or is he right? Am I right or wrong? You know, that's why it's really hard to describe a wine and take it for 100% what we're saying. You know, you have to put your own interpretation. At the end of the day, do you like the wine? And does the wine meet whatever you want out of it? Is it a good value? Is it good with food? Does it make you happy? Does it refresh you? Does it make you warm and cozy? I mean, that's what matters at the end. And I think what Portuguese wines offer, especially in the reds, is that sort of easy drinking, value, everyday red wine. You know, kind of, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. So just, I'm not kicking anyone off, but it is past 7 o'clock. So I just wanted to do a quick wrap up before we head into Q&A. So there's more time to ask any question you want. But I just wanted to thank everyone for tuning in this night where I'm sure there's a million other things people are wanting to watch and pay attention to. But please, this is now your time. Please ask questions, please make comments, talk about what you're eating with the wine. The floor is yours now.
Can we say obrigado?
Obrigado?
Hello.
Does that mean thank you or goodbye?
Thank you.
Obrigado is thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I should know this. My sister's boyfriend, soon to be fiance, is from Brazil, so they speak Portuguese. I should know that.
Obrigado. I'm drinking wine with a court filing I have to do later tonight. So how's that gonna go?
Wine with a what?
A court filing I have to do later tonight.
Whatever it takes to get through. No,
That's
I do a lot of PowerPoints with a good bottle.
And for that matter, if you're not going to sit and, you know, there are wines that are contemplative wines. These are wines you want to sit and you want to drink and you want to wax poetic and you want to just talk about them and just kind of savor every sip. And then there are wines you just want to drink and enjoy and not have to think. And I think I think that Portuguese wines as a whole, both of these wines offer that, where you could just sit down and you could be doing something else, but really enjoy what you're sipping. But then you can take like the Encruzado especially and put it with food, and you're holding up the nadas, which is making me really jealous.
Sorry.
Wait, so how many of you live in Los Angeles? Almost everyone. And Leslie and Brian, where are you guys?
We're in DC.
You're in DC. Okay. So in the LA area, I'm pretty sure that DC has more than one. But in LA, there's one Portuguese bakery. If you go to Sherman Oaks, and it's on Fulton and Ventura Boulevard, across from the car wash, there's a little strip mall, and there's a Portuguese restaurant and bakery. And you can get the nadas, which are the custard tarts. And if you eat Chinese dim sum, they're similar. They're actually influenced by each other. The Portuguese influence the Chinese, or Chinese influence the Portuguese. It goes back centuries to these little custard tarts, and they're delectable. So
are they sweet or savory?
Sweet, but not sweet.
Like it's a sweet custard without it being like sugary.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they're really, really good.
Would you like to taste, Gina?
Oh my God, it is dinner time. I would love some. Send some my way. Ship it over.
Yeah, we'll get. I will say the Portuguese take credit for teaching the Japanese how to say thank you. So in Japanese, arigato.
Uh-huh.
In Portuguese, obrigado. Or unless you're a woman, obrigata.
Obrigada.
Obrigata.
Obrigada, yeah.
Yeah. For a woman, for a man.
The Portuguese are just not as staccato. They're a little more like,
yeah.
Obrigada. You know, they
A lot of zhuzh.
Yeah, a lot of zhuzh.
Yeah.
And then you get into the Brazilians, and that's a whole nother Portuguese. Like,
yeah, I've never had a Brazilian.
We'll bring my sister's boyfriend on as the next guest.
I'm gonna be muted.
In the background.
I don't think that was the
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So with the red wine here, it's interesting. I thought it was interesting hearing you kind of refer to this as being like really drinkable. For me, it was. I mean, I really enjoyed it, but it was very like almost like bitter to me. Almost more like it kind of reminded me almost like of an Amaro. Maybe that was the licorice that you were talking about, Mike. Is this kind of a pretty common kind of wine for Portugal? Is this pretty representative of other like Portuguese reds, or is this kind of unique in that sense?
I don't think it's typical or unique one way or another. Like, I wouldn't say this is what Portuguese reds taste like. I wouldn't say this is an anomaly. But I think what you're getting, it is, it's got tannins on it, that kind of drying, and it's also got acidity, which can result in kind of that bitter finish. And if you put this with like a piece of hard cheese,
We
or a
literally
little
did in the middle and changed it dramatically.
Yeah.
yeah, it would influence it, because, you know, it's a wine that wants food. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of these wines are not meant just for sipping
Yeah.
sake.
Definitely, as it's opened up, it's gotten a lot more like approachable. But yeah, like I definitely agree. Like in the beginning, on Mike's notes of I was getting a lot of heat off of it, like initially, but we had some manchego with it, and so that helped. And then just the time aspect, it's softening a little bit in that regard.
Yeah. Did the manchego take away the bitterness for you?
A little bit. Like, well, I think it's just like it's coated my palate more. I mean, because we had something with like red sauce for dinner before this, so it's like I could have been coming into this like really acidic or just like completely off balance.
So red sauce, tomato sauce is a really interesting thing for food pairing. I can't speak to red sauce in this wine in specific, in particular, but if you think about red sauces and Italian wine, you think of Sangiovese and you think of Barbera, you think of wines that are high acidity but low tannin.
Yeah.
As soon as you get tannins, if you put a Cabernet with red sauce, you're going to get a metallic taste in your mouth. It'll fight each other. It'll fight.
Yeah.
And it's not a good pairing. I mean, you can do it, but there's not harmony in it, and it really will create a metallic taste. Tomatoes and tannins do not go well. So it is possible that your initial sips, because you had the red sauce, didn't like the tannins in this. That is possible.
Right. And we say manchego is a really waxy sort of cheese. So that waxy sort of thing, in my experience, tends to coat the palate a little and kind of protect it in a way from anything that's too harsh or tannic or bitter. And so I could see that being an adjustment that, but for me, I mean, I've actually read some folks say that cheese and wine is not as good of a pairing as we tend to think it. I still love it and do it all the time, but I do think that if you're really wanting to taste a wine as it's, you know, it's kind of a clumsy pairing in a way. Some obvious, you know, there's some examples that people would say, no, that's not clumsy, that's brilliant, but I think in general, like that does kind of make sense to me. I'm still going to eat cheese with my wine.
Yeah, the cheese was the course
but I do understand I'm sort of tainting the, you know, the purity of the wine when I do so, because I'm changing my palate a lot.
Yeah.
Well, David, how did it work with the bacon?
It worked well with the bacon, the saffron, and the shrimp.
Okay.
Both wines worked.
Did you grill the shrimp, or was it like sauteed in the sauce?
It was sauteed, but we didn't. We just picked it up. We cheated. Sorry.
That's okay.
No, but I mean, I do think that a lot of wines are enhanced with food, and cheese may not be the right pairing for a particular wine, but there are wines that taste better with food. I remember my first aha moment of a food and wine pairing. And when I first got into wine, and it was something with champagne, rosé champagne and foie gras, or Pinot and foie gras. It was a Taittinger dinner, and I just came home and I was like, oh my God, like I had never had that happen in my mouth. Like it was harmony, and it was exquisite, and it was just, it worked. And I remember, and don't mock me for what I said, but I used to come home and I would tell my parents about, like, you know, it was amazing, and I didn't even like foie gras, and then you drink it with the wine, and oh my God. And my dad, who's a lawyer, would just look at me and shake his head, because he didn't know. I was rebuilding my career. I was starting out in the wine business. Who knew like what this was? And he used to tease me all the time and just say, I don't understand what you're talking about. Like the fact that you can have a conversation about what food and wine are doing together. And then my parents went up to Sonoma for their anniversary. This was years ago. And there was a restaurant in Healdsburg at the time called Cyrus, which was it was sort of the, my boss at the time, who was a wine critic, said that if French Laundry is like, it was French Laundry with a heart, because French Laundry is so, you know, structured and rigid.
Overrated. And
well, structured and rigid, and everything is about precision. And Cyrus was of that quality of food, but there was warmth and feeling to it. And I'd eaten there twice, and it was an exquisite, like the most expensive meal I'd ever paid for myself. The second time I went there, the first time I went with my boss and he paid. And so I sent my parents there for their anniversary saying, you'll love this meal. And I got a call from my parents afterwards saying, what an amazing meal it was. They loved it. They decided to share a wine pairing because they'd been out wine tasting all day. They didn't want to drink that much. And then my dad starts to tell me, my mom says, well, your dad got this wine. It was a Barolo. And it was an Italian red. I think it was a Barolo. And he didn't really like it at first. And I said, yeah, you know, they're tough wines, and, you know, whatever. And then my dad goes, but Allie, then the food, oh my God, it was amazing, oh my God. And I said, see, when you've had that aha moment, that one time, and you understand how it can change a wine, you aren't sort of killing the wine. You're bringing it to life the way many winemakers in many wine regions mean their wine to be drunk. Other than California, other than America, in Europe, they make wine to have at the table with your food. That's that.
What do they say? What grows together goes together. So like that's an actual saying that a lot of people in the food and wine industry say is, you know, if wine is specifically growing in this region, you're probably going to want to pair it with something that is traditionally made in the kitchens of that same region, because they're pulling from the same kind of playing field of flavors.
Right. Yeah. If you're drinking Santa Maria or Paso Robles wine, you should have Santa Maria tri-tip with it. It's going to make sense. It's a great pairing.
Which pro tip, I don't know about the other Ralphs where you guys all are, but in our Ralphs here in Santa Barbara, where Aaron and I are, they have in the meat area, they have a pre-seasoned tri-tip specifically seasoned for Santa Maria tri-tip. And I don't eat meat that often, but that tri-tip is amazing.
So yeah, I mean, back to what you were saying, Leslie and Brian, I think that a lot of times, you know, you have to kind of think about, so much about food and wine pairing is about acid and tannin with the food. So, you know, it's always fun to play along. And in the end, this may not be your favorite wine to pair with something, or you may say, hey, I really like it when I have some grilled meat, but I don't really like it when I have barbecue because the sauce. So that's where it's fun. And the great thing is that when you're buying wines that are under $20, you can play around and have fun, because it's not the same when you're spending 50 or more on a bottle.
Real quick, I think one question that you guys asked was, how does this compare to other Portuguese red wines? I think at this price point, it's really, it's above par. I've had a lot of like $9, $10, $12 Portuguese reds, sometimes with good ratings and good recommendation. They were just kind of okay. You know, they didn't really do anything special. They weren't bad, and for the price they were okay, but they weren't, I mean, I think this in particular is, I think we ran kind of good tonight, and this is a very good wine for the.
Yeah, I was really surprised when you said what the price of this one was. I was really surprised.
Yeah, I think it's really high quality, great, what they call QPR, quality to price ratio. I think is something, a good way to think about wine and pricing. You know, like, does this compare well with other $10 wines? Does this compare well with other $20 wines? Does this compare well with other $50 wines? It's something you can sort of use across the board for whatever it is you like to buy.
And if anyone wants to reorder these wines, just like last time with the Italian wines, I will send out an email that has the recording of this video or of this Zoom in case you missed anything you wanted to revisit informationally wise. But I will also send out a link to purchase more of these wines. And yeah, I know I'm reordering more of the Incruzado.
Yay! I have a few extra bottles sitting here that I've been holding on to, so.
Oh, Allie, you said you'd deliver them to LA people. My mom's waiting. We've seen your stash.
I just cleaned it up more. So I have a bunch of wines that I've corvined and tasted, and I saw one of my neighbors the other day and I'm like, do you want wine? She goes, I haven't had a drink since January. And I'm like, she goes, I think I'm ready. I said, I mean, 1 month I get, 8 months is the whole, 9 months, 10 months is a whole nother thing. So I sent her walking back to her place with like 3 bottles under her arm and stuff. So Kathy just messaged me.
All right, I'll have to cook something for you though.
Okay.
That's a fair trade.
No, I mean, it's fun too, because there are just so many wines out there, and it is, if you can, you know, Portuguese wine, if you can find other encruzados, you know, go get a couple and taste them, maybe side by side, or again, just over a period of time, and notice like that everything I said about this grape is true. Or, you know, pick up other Portuguese red blends from Alentejo or from other regions and kind of see, but you always have to remember that a red blend, you know, the varietal makeup is different. You know, you may not have Alicante Boucher in another wine, which adds some intense color and flavor, or, you know, the blends always make a difference. So you always have to kind of take a good look at what you have and as you compare it to other things. So
Thank you, Allison and Gina and Mike. I really enjoy, I know nothing about Portuguese wines. I particularly liked the white, the Incruzado. So thank you for introducing me to that.
Thank you for joining. And if any of you have to hop off, please feel free. We're so excited for our final installment of this series anyways, which will be in 2 weeks from tonight, tasting the amazing
Austrian wine.
Thank you. I almost said Australian. Austrian wines, which I'm really, really excited about. And then I believe that I might be speaking for Allison and Mike here, but I believe that we want to do another one of these 3-part series probably after the holidays. So we'll experience more interesting, cool wines from different awesome countries as well in the future. So yay.
Yeah, so please share with us if there are particular countries or regions or grapes or things that kind of intrigue you that you want to delve into more. Even if you don't know a grape necessarily, you say, oh, I want to know about the wines of Jura in France, or I want to know about, you know, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what others weird and wacky, but, you know, just let us know so that we can figure out what kind of great values we can find for you and really out of the way wines.
I will tell you, we did a wine tour in Ensenada.
Uh-huh.
There's the vineyards there that are
There's some
200
cool
years
ones.
old. It was amazing, truly amazing.
That
And
would be
we're
really
from
fun.
Santa Barbara and Paso in that area, so
Valle de Guadalupe is amazing.
Yes.
Amazing to visit. When you can travel again, go across the border to the Valle de Guadalupe. It's about 20 minutes, 30 minutes in from Ensenada. You can stay in the valley in some of the most incredible bed and breakfasts and hotels. The food is extraordinary, and the wines are really good. They're interesting, and there's some really good producers there. And I know an importer who works with the wines, and we can always see about doing it. I will say one thing is that if you ever do want to do a tasting of Valle de Guadalupe wines, they're not inexpensive. I mean, they're not overpriced, but we're not going to be able to get you wines that are under like $20. Like
they're hard to find here also because we were only allowed to bring so many back on the, we went on a cruise. Well, we brought 6. They let us bring 6 bottles. Yeah. But then I asked, well, where can I buy them in the States? I figured San Diego or something. And they said, no, we're not allowed to import to the States. So that made it difficult. But maybe you guys, since you are also savvy.
Where are you?
Can find it.
Did you say you're based in Santa Barbara?
Well, we lived in Orcutt for 30 years.
Where are you now?
Denver area, Denver Metro.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so we're out in the mountains.
It's hard to find. When we were I actually met Allison in Valle de Guadalupe.
Yeah, that's where we met.
Right, yeah. So
okay, yeah, it's amazing.
Confirms what you're saying, which is it's relatively hard to find the wines here in the United States. They produce and ship almost all their wines to Mexico City, which is kind of crazy.
We were on the trip with an importer. So who's based in Napa. So if it's of interest, it's definitely something, Gina, we can talk to the importer and see what he has available.
I think that's a really cool idea because the wines specifically from Valle de Guadalupe are like so salty and briny, and it's such a unique flavor and experience with wine. And just, I mean, we'll talk about this if we can get our hands on some affordable wines from there. It's because they actually water all of their crops with ocean water, which is crazy. You'd never think that's a thing, but they do it and it works.
We'll find our bottles. We'll message you about the ones in particular we had, the winery. So it's really good. Gorgeous location also.
Yeah, they also do a lot of really crazy blends. So there's a lot of fun stuff, and there are a lot of U.S. expats who have moved down there and made that a home. So there's some great people. There's a lot of Italian immigrants and a lot of American expats who have found their home there. I've been down since Mike and I met there. I've been down a couple other times to write stories and explore, and I can't wait to go back. I love it down there.
Yeah. If it was a little safer, I'd be there all the time. I'm half Mexican, so it's, nothing for me to go, but it's just not that safe anymore. Last place I went was Puerto Vallarta, and it was all Canadians and Americans. But, it was so much fun. It's just so peaceful and, not the summer. It's kind of hot there, but, the rest of the year.
I miss traveling.
I know. Oh my God.
But on that note, we took you to Portugal tonight, and we can take you to Austria.
My husband's over here with the map planning. I wonder if we can find an Airbnb inside the winery. It's like, probably.
It wouldn't surprise me. A lot of the larger wineries, specifically like this one, they probably do have some B&Bs available.
The big one. Yeah.
Or stay at a posada.
What's that?
It's I guess sort of before Airbnb, but they're kind of historical hotels run kind of by it's POUSADA, I think. Run, sort of government, but they're usually nice places rather than, some hotel.
Right. So, I mean, we could stay at the Marriott, but it's kind of fun to stay at Airbnbs and kind of get that feel. Yeah. That's what we did when we went to Italy. We just, you know, so you're near the farmer's market, and, you know, they're telling you all the local places to go. So you get a feel for what it's like to be there and live there.
Yeah.
I
It's
like
a great, it's a fabulous, fabulous country. When my dad built a house there in the 70s, and that was in the town we were in. To go to market, all the farmers they didn't have little like pickup trucks. They still came to the market with all their goods by donkey cart. It was,
oh my gosh.
it was just wonderful. But
it's like going to Mexico. What century are we in?
If and when you ever get to Portugal, I say if or when, because next year sometime. No, if you go to Porto, email me. I have a passion of eating my way through every country and finding places to eat, from 2-star Michelin to like the local. Like I go on food tours, and I have, you know.
That's what we do. We make our trips around the food always, you know? Even if it's just the famous hot dog cart in New York City. It's like, okay, at 2 we're going here. He's the one that does all the planning, so it's like there's no resting on our trips.
But it's a great country. The people are so wonderful. I haven't been back in a while, and I was going to go this year, but then, you know, COVID. So
they have a couple of food tours in Porto and great seafood restaurants if you go out to the beach, and just amazing food. And to what Gina and Mike were saying, you get really regional, interesting things. So you get to try, you know, some seafood you never had, and different. I mean, it's just Portugal is an amazing place, and hopefully. Other than
they call you
texting me photos, making me jealous the whole time. He's been texting me photos of vineyards in Portugal. But if you have the chance, plan a trip to Portugal. And I mean, like I said, Portugal fits in California a couple times over. So
small. Where do you live? In what city?
I'm in Los Angeles.
But the city of LA, or
in
like
West LA?
Okay, we go all the time. We used to live in North Hollywood also. And then we have a daughter that lives in South Pasadena. I thought, I'm going to call her and see if we can meet and do a wine thing.
Let me know.
Our treat. It'll be fun. You know, I love being with people who can educate me about wine, not just sit and drink it, you know. It's fun. It makes it interesting.
Well, there are a lot of people who love to drink wine, so I'm sure, call me if you're in LA.
Yeah, I will. It'll be fun.
Ryan and Melanie, where are you guys again? You're in the Valley?
We are in, sorry, excuse our child.
We have a toddler that is wanting Tylenol because she's teething, and we won't give it to her.
She drinks Tylenol, like we drink wine lately, and it's getting to be a problem.
Maybe she needs to get wine.
But we live in Santa Clarita, so like North LA, off the 126. So but we're trying to move to Santa Barbara. We just have to find the right house.
Woo! Well, good luck.
That would be nice.
And let's see, Leslie and Brian, you're in DC. And Jay Martin, where are you guys?
I'm in Ventura.
Okay.
Love it. I have a leftover question from last week. So last week, my computer died right when it was question time. So like everybody's saying goodbye, and I'm like, whoop, I'm out. So my question was, you know, we talked a lot about the DOCG, but the bottles didn't have those labels on them. You know, the red and white labels that kind of go over the cork or around the bottle when showing it's DOC or DOCG.
He means for Italian wines, it's the tax stamp that goes
right.
on the tops. Yeah.
So those weren't on there.
It's probably because of how we got them directly from the distributor importer.
Okay, I guess whenever I've had an Italian wine from here, I've always seen that. So that was a question I had.
That's actually a good point. So if you want to look at your bottles, you can see it better than what I have here. But there's the vineyard label. So this is what's printed from their winery when the bottles are labeled. But this other label, and sometimes there's a label pasted on top of the vineyard label, but this is actually the label for the distributor or the importer, I'm sorry. So that sticker or I don't know, whatever they do, maybe around the foil, that's probably also another importer designation.
No, I think it's regional because I'm looking at this. This is the red we had 2 weeks ago. And it says it on the back. It says Denomination de Origine Controllata right on the back in the label. I think that because this is Southern Italy, I don't think you'll see them as much on them. I think it's more of a Tuscan and Piedmont thing. Because I know you'll see it on Chianti wine, and I'm pretty sure you see it on Barolos. But I could pull out some of my Italian to see, but I just don't think that is the strip is more of a regional thing.
Okay, good. I'm glad you answered that because I was like, couldn't sleep all week. And then
when you think about Southern Italy is sort of like the new kids on the block because they've been making wine for a long time, but they're now making better wine and exporting to the US. And so they're sort of like, they're hipper, right? Their labels are a little hipper and cooler, and they label well, they don't always label the grapes, but it's not quite as traditional as like a Tuscany or a Piedmont or a Veneto.
Okay, and my second question was, remember we talked about the age of the vineyards and, you know, it was from 1777 or 1775. I forgot what side of 1776. And then we talked about the bugs that went through and killed everything. And my thought was the reason maybe those vines survived is because they were in sandy soil instead of soil. But once again, my computer died and I was like, so is that a possibility?
Yes, absolutely. Because the regions that have survived from phylloxera and not been affected tend to be sandy soil places. So if you look at the vineyards in Spain and you go to Priorat, which is sandy soils, phylloxera never hit Priorat. It hit the rest of the country. And so Santorini with Assyrtiko growing in sand, these are areas that haven't been affected by phylloxera.
Okay,
so, yeah.
Good.
Very good.
Oh my God. Thank you.
And yeah, anything else?
Well, all right, guys. As always, please feel free to email us if you do have any other questions. I will be sending an email out probably Monday, again, with the links to purchase more of this wine if you wanted to, the recording of this tasting, so you can look back on it. You already have the tasting notes, the tasting tech sheet that I sent out on Wednesday. And we're so excited and so happy that you guys are here, and we're excited to build on these tasting series. And please enjoy the rest of your evening. Get back to watching the news like we all are. And have a wonderful weekend. Hopefully we'll all be enjoying our weekends.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, stay dry. It's supposed to rain all weekend. Not for you guys in DC, but for us in California, we're about to get deluged apparently with the one rain of the year.
Don't worry, everything's gonna be totally fine and normal here in DC. It'll be fine.
You've got your own storm brewing.
Yeah, DC, I lived in DC for 4 years. I've never dealt with such schizophrenic weather. You'll have like summer for 2 hours and then winter the rest of the weekend, and then you'll have spring for 3 minutes, and then you'll have fall.
Thankfully, we get fall this weekend. It's going to be the low 70s.
You need to try Colorado. It's every 2 hours the weather changes, so you get all 4 seasons in a day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Happy Friday.
That's